on your week 4 test on immigration, you need to know that under immigration in the United States, where it says, where did they come from and why did they come? You need to know that until the 1880s, most immigrants came to the United States from Ireland, Great Britain, Germany, and Sweden. Most of them came home searching for a better way of life. In their home countries, many of these people were poor, hungry, unemployed, and without basic freedoms of speech and religion. For example, over 1 million people left Ireland and came to America in the late 1840s. A horrible disease destroyed the potato crop there, which caused a terrible food shortage in the country. So you need to know all of the above. That the Jewish people were persecuted, a horrible disease destroyed the potato crop in Ireland, and many of these people were poor, hungry, unemployed, and without basic freedom of speech. This is also right here under this section where it says many Jewish people were persecuted. They were without freedom of speech. This one question kind of goes with both of these answers. Again, under the same section on your test, it says, which sentence below best explains the reasons why people immigrated to the United States between the 1800s and 1950s? So this is kind of the same answer. Between the 1800s and 1950s, most immigrants came to the U.S. searching for a better way of life. In their home countries, many of these people were poor, hungry, unemployed, and without basic freedoms of speech and religion. So both of these paragraphs under where did they come from and why did they come kind of talks about at their home country they were poor, they were hungry, they did not have freedom of speech, they were unemployed, and all the above. So they came to the United States to get a better life. Scrolling down to settling in. It says, what type of work did most immigrants do once they arrived in America? And we also learned this last week that most of the people coming to America worked in factories. Right here it says, most immigrants during this time period settled in large cities such as New York, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, and San Francisco. American cities were growing places with factories that offered jobs to the newly arrived immigrants. So most of these newly arriving immigrants worked in factories. You have another question that's very similar that also says, why were large cities good places for immigrants to settle? And we also talked about this last week, that in these larger cities, you have more factories. So the larger cities were growing places and they offered factories with new jobs. Immigrants' impact on the United States. Okay, on this question, what you need to know is that what impact did the immigrants have on the United States? Right here it says they filled jobs in factories and helped the American economy grow by leaps and bounds. They also brought their unique languages, foods, and music, contributing to the mix of different cultures that we know as the United States of America. So you need to know both of those things. Next, under Ellis Island, we talked about Ellis Island and what it was to go through Ellis Island if you wanted to come to America. It says, if the immigrants passed through these steps successfully, they were allowed to enter the country. Right here, and I've got this highlighted. What does the word steps mean? So you need to know that in this sentence, steps mean stages. So for immigrants to come to America, they had to go through different stages or different steps in their process of coming to America. And they had to be checked for diseases. They had to go through this medical exam. They had to answer questions as to why they wanted to come to America. So all these were different stages that they had to go through. So you need to know that steps mean stages. Okay, on your test, you're going to see this picture. This picture, you have 3 different questions that go along with it. One question says, how do you know that this photograph was taken long ago? Well, just by looking at this picture, we see that the clothing and the shoes the children are wearing look old-fashioned. They don't have on gym shorts and t-shirts and tennis shoes like you guys wear today. The children today do not work in factories, and you can tell that these well, we know from learning this week and last week that these students did have to work in the factories. And the caption also tells the reader the date. So you need to know all of these things, because it says in the early 1900s. Just by looking at this picture, you can tell that it was taken long ago. Also, this picture tells us, it says, what would another caption be from the choices that make the most sense for this photograph? And just by looking at this picture, it says, teenagers and young children often had to work to help support their families. And we talked about that last week, that the parents did not have a lot of money, so they had to rely on their children to get jobs, working in factories, and that was when child labor was legal. Again, this same picture, it says, based on what you have read about this week, what topic of information do you think this photograph represents from the choices below? And that would be child labor. This is another example. We had this on our test last week also, of a little girl standing in a factory. And this is another example of, these are students outside getting ready for work. And the last thing you need to know is, under public schools to the rescue, you need to know that it says, how did public schools help immigrant children during the late 1800s and early 1900s? Right here in our text, it tells us that American schools were filled with immigrant children trying to adjust to a new and unfamiliar home. Many could not speak English, and they weren't used to the American culture or way of life. School became a place where children could learn to read and write a new language, as well as learn a new culture. So we need to know that school was a place where children could learn to read and write a new language and learn a new culture.